Help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. In this video, she said it was a business trip. I tracked her to a motel. What I found inside changed everything. About her, and about me. Jake had always trusted his wife Vanessa, until that Thursday night. She was supposed to be in Chicago at a 2-day branding conference with her agency team. But when Jake tried calling her around 9:15 p.m., the call went straight to voicemail. Twice. That wasn't he like her. Even when she was busy, she always managed to send a quick text or voice note just to let him know she was okay. Jake brushed it off at first, telling himself not to overthink it, but the nagging feeling stayed. Just before bed, he opened their Find My app on a whim. What he saw made his heart stop. Instead of showing her location in downtown Chicago near the convention center, Vanessa's phone last pinged in a small rural town 3 hours away, at a rundown motel off I-94, Motel Ridgeview. The map said. Jake stared at the screen for a few seconds, hoping it was some kind of glitch, but the timestamp was clear. Location updated. 8:42 p.m. Why would she be there? There was no work-related event in that area. No friends, no family, no explanation. Jake zoomed in on the map, clicking into Street View. That place looked like something out of a crime documentary. Faded sign, flickering neon, barely 5 cars in the lot, and yet, that's where her phone was. Still convinced there had to be a logical reason. Jake tried calling again. Still voicemail. He waited 20 minutes, pacing, no texts, no missed calls, nothing. Finally, around 11 p.m., a simple idea lodged in his brain and refused to leave. What if she wasn't alone? And what if she didn't want to be found? Jake didn't sleep that night. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd just witnessed the first crack in a marriage he thought was unshakable. The question replayed in his mind like a broken record. What could she possibly be doing at that motel? You want to believe what Jake finds next. Keep watching to uncover what really happened. In the next chapter. The next morning, Jake couldn't take it anymore. He called into work, said he wasn't feeling well, and by 8 a.m., he was already on the road heading toward Ridgeview Motel. 3 hours of silence in the car gave him too much time to spiral. What if she was hurt? What if she was cheating? What if she was hiding something bigger than an affair? He kept checking the app. Her phone was still there. As Jake pulled into the dusty motel lot, he spotted Vanessa's silver SUV near the far end, parked beside a black Mercedes-Benz with tinted windows. His stomach twisted. The motel looked even worse in person. Cracked pavement, faded paint, a flickering vacancy sign that buzzed like an insect in heat. Jake parked 3 spots away, heart racing. He took out his phone, snapped a photo of the license plate on the Mercedes just in case, then walked slowly toward the main office. Inside, a sleepy-looking clerk in a torn hoodie barely looked up from his screen. Jake faked a polite smile and said, "Hey, my wife said she accidentally left our reservation info in the car and asked me to grab the spare key. Vanessa Moore, room 12. The guy barely blinked. He reached under the counter, pulled out a key card, and handed it to Jake without a word. Jake could barely believe it worked. Room 12 was around the back. His palms were sweaty. He kept glancing around to make sure no one was watching. When he reached the door, he paused. He could hear voices. A man's voice, and Vanessa's. They were laughing. Jake's throat went dry. He pressed his ear closer to the door. And then, through the cheap walls, he heard the most devastating sentence of his life. Vanessa's voice, low and clear. "Don't worry, he still thinks I'm in Chicago." Jake staggered back from the door like he'd been punched. He didn't cry. He didn't knock. He just stood there, frozen. The betrayal was no longer a fear. It was real. It was happening. But something else hit him harder. That second voice. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. Stay with the story. You'll want to hear who was inside that room. In the next chapter. Jake stood there, paralyzed. That voice from inside. He couldn't shake how familiar it was. He knew it. Not just vaguely. He knew it. A few more muffled laughs. Vanessa's tone had changed. Smoother. Almost flirty. Jake's heart pounded as he crouched beside the window and carefully peeked through a narrow gap in the curtains. What he saw knocked the air out of his lungs. Sitting across from his wife on the edge of the bed, drink in hand, was Logan, Jake's best friend since college, his best man at their wedding, the godfather of their son. His brain couldn't process it fast enough. He ducked back down, shaking, sweat running down his neck. This wasn't just a fling. This was betrayal on a level he hadn't even imagined. Jake pulled out his phone and started recording through the cracked window. He needed proof. Not just for himself, but for court, for custody, for his sanity. Inside, Vanessa leaned over and whispered something to Logan, then giggled. Jake's blood boiled. He wanted to burst in, to scream, to hit something. But then, Logan said something that froze him again. "You're sure he won't find out about the trust?" Vanessa nodded. "He doesn't even know it exists. By the time he catches up, the money's already gone." Jake's hands started trembling uncontrollably. What trust? What money? Had this been about more than an affair all along? Was this a setup? And then Logan said one more thing that twisted the knife. "It's poetic, isn't it?" He signed the papers himself. Jake collapsed against the motel wall, gasping for air. His entire world was not just cracking. It was being detonated from the inside. He wasn't just being cheated on. He was being robbed, played, and worst of all, he trusted both of them. Now he didn't know what was worse, the betrayal or how easily they pulled it off. But Jake had one thing they didn't know. He was no longer in the dark, and he had just hit record. What he does next will change everything. In the next chapter, Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat in his car outside the motel, reviewing the footage over and over again, memorizing every word, every glance, every betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was the money, the trust, the signatures. It was betrayal at a strategic level. He felt like his entire marriage had been a con from the start. But what hurt the most was Logan. Logan, who once cried during Jake's wedding speech. Logan, who held Jake's newborn son before even Jake's own parents did. Logan, who sat in that motel room with his arm around Jake's wife. Jake started putting things together that didn't make sense before. Vanessa's sudden interest in their family finances. Her push to sign some estate planning forms 6 months ago. The closed-door meetings she claimed were therapy. Jake realized he had been signing away power without even knowing. But there was still one thing he didn't understand. Why Logan? He could imagine a fling with a stranger, a coworker, a gym trainer. But this was personal. Jake opened his phone and scrolled back through old texts. That's when he noticed something chilling. A deleted message from Logan, weeks ago, saying, "Just make sure he signs before the 18th. Then it's ours." Jake stared at it, his fingers trembling. He hadn't seen it before. It was in a group thread with Vanessa. Hidden in an archive chat they thought he'd forgotten. Then it hit him. This wasn't impulsive. This was orchestrated, carefully, methodically, with Jake as the blindfolded puppet signing away his family's future. But now he was awake, and they had no idea. So Jake made a plan. He wasn't going to confront them yet. He was going to play along, set his own trap. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled, because the game had just turned, and he wasn't playing nice anymore. What he does next will flip the entire story upside down. In the next chapter, Jake knew if he moved too fast, they'd shut him out. So instead, he played the role of the clueless husband. He apologized to Vanessa for being distant lately and suggested a weekend away to reconnect. She hesitated for a second, just a second, and then smiled. Too quickly, she agreed. Jake booked a luxury hotel in a nearby town. It was a setup. Every inch of the room was bugged. He even paid extra for access to the hallway security cameras. But that wasn't the only part of his plan. He also made sure to leave a fake folder labeled "Trust Update, Signatures Needed," half tucked into his laptop bag. It was bait, and on the night they arrived at the hotel, Jake got a call. A fake emergency from his office. He left Vanessa alone in the suite with a bottle of wine, a fake work USB stick, and confidential papers in plain sight. Then he drove 5 blocks down and watched the live feed from his phone. 37 minutes later, Logan showed up at the hotel, not through the front, through the service entrance. He used a keycard. Jake's blood turned cold. Vanessa greeted him at the door in a robe. They didn't waste time. Jake watched them pour drinks, laugh, and then Vanessa opened the folder. She pointed to the documents. Logan squinted, then pulled out his phone and took photos of every page. Jake had just caught them in the act. Not only of betrayal, but of attempted fraud, and this time he had the evidence. But Jake wasn't done yet. He called someone, not the police, someone worse, someone who had a reason to destroy Logan and wouldn't ask many questions, someone from Logan's past. And once this person got involved, things would spiral faster than anyone expected, especially for Vanessa. Coming up next, what happens when the past crashes into their little plan? Jake didn't call a hitman. He called Daniel Moore, a former business partner of Logan's. Daniel had vanished after being publicly ruined by Logan 5 years ago. His company bankrupt, his reputation shattered, his marriage destroyed. Jake tracked Daniel down through a burner forum where corporate blacklists get traded like baseball cards. He sent Daniel one thing: the video footage of Logan and Vanessa in the hotel suite, with the stolen documents on screen. Daniel didn't reply, but 2 hours later, Jake received a notification. An encrypted message that simply read, "I've waited years for this. I'm in." Jake didn't know exactly what Daniel would do, and honestly, he didn't care. He just wanted to watch Logan's carefully polished world collapse. The next day, Logan's name was flagged in a leak to the Daily Ledger, a national news outlet known for tearing down public figures. An anonymous source accused him of securities fraud, insider trading, and laundering funds through shell charities. And the cherry on top, the leaked documents were identical to the fake trust papers Jake had planted. But Logan didn't panic. He had friends in high places. That's when Daniel dropped the second bomb. An audio recording surfaced. Logan's voice, explicit, incriminating, and worst of all, it referenced someone called V. Jake knew what that meant, Vanessa, and suddenly, she wasn't just involved in betrayal. She was complicit in a federal crime. The walls were closing in on both of them now. But Jake wasn't finished. He was about to make one final move, and it would change the game forever. Coming up, Jake finally confronts Vanessa, but what she confesses, no one could have predicted. Jake waited until midnight. Vanessa was in the bedroom, her phone clutched in her hand, probably checking to see if Logan had survived the media firestorm. Jake stepped in, quietly, and shut the door behind him. She looked up, startled, but didn't speak. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just whispered, "Why him?" Vanessa froze. Then something broke in her. She sat down on the edge of the bed and said, "Because I wanted to ruin him." Jake was speechless. He expected tears, maybe denial. But not this, not calm, cold revenge. She explained everything. Logan had destroyed her sister's life. He seduced her, used her name to cover illegal donations through her nonprofit, then ghosted her when the IRS came knocking. Her sister lost everything. Her job, her credibility, and almost her freedom. Vanessa had waited years. Then she married Jake, not for love, though she said she learned to care, but for access. Jake's firm handled legal affairs for Logan's company. Vanessa used him to get information, plant bugs, steal passwords. The affair wasn't the betrayal. Jake was. He was the tool, the pawn. And now that Logan was burning, she planned to disappear before the smoke cleared. Jake stood there, shattered, but instead of anger, a strange clarity set in. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly, and then he opened the drawer where he'd hidden the second flash drive, the one with her name on it, the one she never knew he made. And when she saw it, her face turned white. What exactly was on that second drive? And why did it scare Vanessa more than anything else Jake had done? Find out what happens in the next chapter. Vanessa stared at the flash drive like it was a loaded gun. Her voice cracked when she asked, "What's on it?" Jake didn't blink. He simply said, "Proof of everything." Vanessa shook her head, trying to maintain control, but her eyes darted toward the door. Already thinking of escape, Jake stepped closer and set the flash drive on the dresser. Then he pulled out a second copy from his coat pocket. "I made backups," he said calmly. "Multiple." Her confidence shattered. Jake revealed he had started suspecting her 6 months ago. She had been too careful, except when she got careless with one thing. Emotion. Jake noticed how she flinched every time Logan's name came up, how she faked her concern when his company was mentioned in the news, how her mood changed every time Jake traveled for work. So Jake had placed a hidden camera in her office at home. She thought she was alone when she called Logan. She wasn't. Jake had the recordings, her voice, her face, her plans. And it wasn't just Logan she was taking down. Vanessa had been feeding sensitive legal documents to a journalist. Leaked court memos, internal audits, evidence of political corruption. All tied to Logan's empire. She wanted Logan ruined in the court of public opinion. But Jake? He was just collateral damage. Jake took a deep breath. I'm giving this to the FBI tomorrow. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. Jake! Don't. He looked at her, hard. Then he asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. Was any of it real? She didn't answer, just stood there in silence. But Jake wasn't done, because the biggest twist wasn't the drive. It was what he had done with the journalist before Vanessa ever met her. And when Jake opened his phone to show Vanessa her own messages, edited and twisted by the journalist for a bigger expose, her knees gave out, because she realized Jake had already turned the tables, and she wasn't the hunter anymore. But what exactly did the journalist tell Jake behind Vanessa's back? And why was this about to turn into national news? Stay with me. In the next chapter. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat in the motel room alone, staring at the walls like they held answers. The air still smelled faintly of Vanessa's perfume, and the silence was thick with unfinished sentences. He had the flash drives, he had the recordings, he had the leverage, but the part that burned most wasn't betrayal. It was the realization that Vanessa wasn't just cheating on him, she had been playing him, and worse, he still didn't understand why. Jake picked up his phone and made the call he'd been avoiding. It rang twice before a tired voice answered. You're late. It was Natalie, the journalist. She had been working undercover at the city's investigative unit for months, feeding Jake intel since he first suspected Vanessa's ties to Logan. Jake asked the question he'd been holding in. Why would Vanessa risk her career, her life, her marriage, for this? Natalie hesitated. Then she said, because she thinks she's saving you. Jake's heart froze. What do you mean? Natalie explained that Logan had dirt on Jake from years ago. False financial reports from Jake's startup days, the kind of thing that could bury a man even if he was innocent. Logan had been using those documents to blackmail Vanessa. Either she helped him secure a new political deal by leaking insider court files from Jake's firm, or Jake would go down. Vanessa had made a choice. She played the villain because Logan had threatened to destroy Jake. Suddenly, every lie she told wasn't just betrayal. It was a sacrifice. Jake sat in silence. Natalie asked quietly, do you still want to give the flash drives to the FBI? Jake didn't respond, because now the decision wasn't just about justice. It was about revenge or redemption. And somewhere, Vanessa was probably waiting, not for forgiveness, but for a bullet to the head of a man who blackmailed her into destroying her own life. But would Jake help her now, or finish what he started? That answer's coming, in the final chapter. Jake parked his car outside the city courthouse, just as the morning sun started bleeding through the skyline. The USB drive sat in his coat pocket like a loaded gun. On it, every piece of evidence that could expose Logan's corruption, his bribes, and the entire blackmail ring. But it also had Vanessa's voice, clear, unmistakable, her voice leaking legal documents, arranging meetings, moving dirty money under Logan's orders. If Jake turned it in, Logan would go down. But so would Vanessa. He stepped into the building, nodding at the security guard he used to joke with before his life fell apart. 3rd floor, Office 3B. That's where the FBI had set up their task force. Jake stood outside the door for a full minute. He thought of the motel, of the night he followed her, of how her body trembled when Logan grabbed her arm, and how she still played her part to keep Jake safe. He thought of all the times she lied to his face, and of the night she collapsed in their bedroom, whispering, I just want this all to be over. Then his phone buzzed, a message from a number with no name. It was a video. Jake played it, hands trembling. It was Vanessa. She sat in a car, in the dark, filming herself, tears in her eyes. "I know you know," she said. "I know you followed me. I know you saw the worst of me, and I don't blame you if you hate me now." She paused. "But I need you to know something before you do what you're about to do." Her voice cracked. "I never chose Logan. I chose you, even when it meant betraying you." She pulled out a gun in the video and placed it on her lap. "I made my bed, and I'm not asking you to save me. Just tell Emma one day, when she's old enough, that her mom didn't want to be a monster." Jake nearly dropped the phone. "Emma, their daughter." Jake turned from the FBI door and walked out. He didn't turn in the drive. He didn't run either. He drove straight to Logan's penthouse. He knew there was no walking away from this quietly. Jake knocked once, then forced the door open. Logan was waiting, but so was Vanessa, standing behind him, her eyes full of shock and something else. "Hope?" Jake held up the USB. Then he smiled coldly and said, "Let's finish this." Gunshots would follow, or maybe handcuffs, or something worse. But one thing was clear. This wasn't a story about betrayal anymore. It was a story about sacrifice, and who would pay the final price. The end.